Hey everybody, Sawyer here, and I'm here with the next installment of my Generational Heroes series. I know it's been a long time since I put one of these out. We did 1960s a few months back, so now we're going to 1970s, and it's going to be interesting because we're starting to get more and more into the modern era of comics, where lots more characters are kind of like introduced. It is not just the staple characters anymore, but and for my number five pick, we're gonna go with the Human Fly. He's kind of an unknown character. Most people are not gonna know who he is. You had a very short-lived series in the '70s by Marvel, and then I think they rebooted it like in the 2000s or something, but it didn't do good. Um, but he is an interesting character. What's mostly interesting is the story behind the character, like the inspiration for the character, because he is, and as the tagline on the book says, he is the real hero, the real hero or whatever they some kind of tagline like a real life hero or whatever, which is kind of interesting because there really was a guy in real life called the Human Fly, whose identity was not known to the public. He was a stunt man, or not a stunt man, but he was like a daredevil. He was like an Evil Knievel kind of guy trying to do all these death-defying stunts. He wore this costume like as seen in the picture. It wasn't as cool looking because the artist really made it better. But anyway, it was an interesting thing that he was actually a real guy. He disappeared. He did a few stunts and then he just disappeared off the face of the earth. No one, at least I don't think anybody really knows what happened to him. But it's very interesting. But regardless of that, the comic book was still fun. It was very interesting. It was basically every issue he was doing some kind of stunt or whatever, and then during the stunt something would happen or nearby a crime would happen, and he would have to basically fight the crime and using his reflexes, his intelligence, his escape artist skills. He didn't really have powers, but he had all these skill sets. He was very fearless. He had like a lot of ingenuity and intelligence. He was very acrobatic. Very well. He was very good at timing stuff. So, and he had these two sidekicks. One was a guy who had who had he was an amputee, so he didn't have hands. He just had the hooks, and he was like an engineer. And then you had this other girl who was like I forget exactly what she did, but they basically helped him out all the time, and it's really cool. I mean, the first issue, I think it's the first issue. He teams up with Spider-Man. It's a really fun issue. I actually enjoyed a lot of these books. They were really interesting. The art was great for the time. So yeah, Human Fly is definitely my number five pick for 1970s characters. And number four, we have Blade, the Vampire Slayer, everybody's favorite badass vampire slayer. Blade's a great character, even though the early incarnations is very dated with the costume design and some of the dialogue choices. I feel like he definitely came out of the black exploitation era. Same thing, kind of like with Luke Cage. They both kind of came out around that time period and were influenced by those movies and stuff. Um, but it's still interesting. I do like the original costume design. It's even though it's cheesy as hell, I do enjoy it. I like the like all the stakes wrapped around his shoulders, and I like the big old green goggles and stuff like that. It's interesting. But Blade's one of those characters that really evolves over the years and becomes much more entertaining, interesting. He's such a driven character. Like especially his original backstory is so it's brutal. It's definitely the kind of story that would set a character up to want to kill vampires, especially Dracula. A lifelong mission. And that's the thing that's most interesting about the character is just he's very driven. He's this kind of like tormented character because he is half vampire. He's half of what he's hunting and trying to destroy, which is always a cool concept to me. You go out and destroy what you are, like your own kind per se. And it just he basically brings in he basically connects the whole supernatural vampire aspects of of literature and stuff to the Marvel universe, which is a very cool kind of thing to bring into the Marvel universe as a whole. And then number three, we have the Ghost Rider, Johnny Blaze. Yeah, sorry for the Marvel overload, guys, but it's just the way it works because like a lot of my favorite characters end up being either vigilantes or they end up being like anti-heroes, and Marvel definitely has the corner market on those archetypes, especially during the '70s. They started oozing them out like crazy. You start to see the foundation of a lot of what those archetypes really represent in comics. With characters like my number one pick and Blade and Ghost Rider and other characters. Yeah, it's interesting. I just find it interesting how that works. Ghost Rider is definitely a more supernatural character. You know, he definitely kind of like how Blade bridges the supernatural aspects of Marvel. Ghost Rider is another character that kind of bridges that, connects it. You know, brings us into that world. Not with vampires, but more with like demons and you know, devils and stuff like that. He's a spirit of vengeance. He's a normal guy who's a similar to our number 5 pick. He is a stuntman who's trying to do a stunt. I think he dies, or he would die, but he sells his soul to the devil in order to stay alive and become the Ghost Rider, a spirit of vengeance, a badass character that's very powerful, has a very interesting power set, and he's just an iconic character, and you can't help but love it. Plus, he's a legacy hero, which means that anybody can don the mantle of Ghost Rider. So the character can always be fresh. You can always bring a new perspective in by having a different kind of person be possessed by the spirit. Which, you know, we've seen Agents of Shield do this in a lot of different ways during season 4. Coming in at number 2 is Ra's al Ghul, or Ra's al Ghul, as some people like to pronounce it. I don't really know which one's the real pronunciation. I'm not going to get into that on this video, but I've always called him Ra's al Ghul ever since I've been a little kid, so that's what I'm going to go with. He is, I mean, I've talked about this character a lot on my top 5 Batman villains. I think he made number 1 on that list if I don't remember, because he is one of my favorite all-time villains. You know, nonetheless a Batman villain. He's just such a great villain. There's so much going for him in favor of him. He's kind of like the Batman of the villains. You know, he's the guy who's got everything, like every skill set, every kind of connection. You know, he's very smart. He's a very smart, cunning strategist, but he's also a very effective fighter, sword fighter. You know, hand-to-hand combat and strategist. He's got a whole organization of, you know, followers, you know, badass assassins that will follow him to the grave. He's got like all this international networks of criminals and enterprises and resources. I mean, the villain just has a lot in his package deal, and it's really interesting how, you know, I just like him because of that. But I think the thing I like the most about this villain is his just his kind of moral standards, his moral code. He's not like a traditional villain where he's just trying to take over the world, or he's just trying to get revenge on somebody. He's basically an eco-terrorist. You know, he cares about the nature and the world, not so much about the people that live on the earth. He's all about trying to cleanse humanity, because he thinks he's one of those guys. He thinks humanity's had its time and we need to be eradicated. And it's a really interesting concept. It's something that, you know, we see more and more as time goes on. You know, but during this time period, it was something very fresh for a villain to have those kind of perspectives. And he does have a code of honor, which is interesting. You know, he's had many chances to kill Batman over the years, but usually he tries to recruit Batman rather than actually kill him, which is also another really interesting dynamic that they have. And reigning supreme at number 1 is Frank Castle, the goddamn Punisher. Was there really any doubt in your mind that this guy was going to be on number 1 on the list? Anybody that really watches my videos knows that I'm a huge Punisher fan, and that obviously he was originally created during the 1970s in Amazing Spider-Man. Now he didn't really appear a lot during the 70s. He was kind of like he's really more established in the 80s, but he did first appear in the 70s, and and his original classic costume and design were all from that era. So I definitely wanted to add him to this one and not the 80s list. Frank is a really great character. I'm always a big fan of the non-powered characters. You know, the people that really have to, they have to compete with all these superpowered people, and they do it by using their, cunning, their physical prowess, and just intelligence. And Frank's a great example of that. You know, he's like Batman in that regard. Even though he's not really as intelligent as Batman. To a certain extent. He's more of a military man. Like, he has the strategy of, in the tactical advantages and all that stuff, which is really interesting. He's a weapons specialist. He's a badass, a fighter. He's very, very driven. The thing that's most interesting about Frank, or Punisher, is his moral compass. Similar to Ra's al Ghul. Ra's al Ghul has kind of an honor system. Like, basically, Ra's al Ghul is like more of a hero than most villains usually are, where Frank is more of a villain than most heroes usually are. It's very interesting how those two characters kind of correlate on the spectrum of good and evil. Frank is by definition a hero, He's not gonna kill. He's not gonna kill little kids. He's not gonna kill innocents or women. Usually, I think originally in the comic books he even had a thing where he wouldn't kill cops, even if they were dirty cops, because they were once a good cop. But he will destroy and murder criminals all day long, like murderers and rapists. And that's something that's really interesting because a lot of heroes don't have that. They don't do that. Which Punisher, that's his whole mindset, and that's what I like about him. He's very well. That's it for my top 5 characters, combo characters of the '70s. Thank you guys for watching, and let me know in the comments if what characters that were conceived in the '70s that you like the most. Like, who's your favorites? Let's start some conversations going. And thank you guys for watching as always, and see you guys later.